I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian tradition.
Teacher?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Triangle Time Loop. I am your host, Bubbawheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode, we are discussing the opening scene in Time Loop that starts at the beginning of the movie and ends at 4 minutes and 36 seconds with the father and son giving each other a toast. Today, my guest is Brian Boucher from Top Gun Minutes. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good.
Oh, that's good to hear. And, we're recording on Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to you.
Happy Father's Day to you.
Before we get into this opening scene, this film Time Loop, it came out just in 2019, and this is, I think, probably one of the most obscure movies that I'm going to be covering in this show. But it tied in so well with Triangle and time crimes and I just kind of randomly watched it. So I enjoyed it for the most part. That I thought it would be a good movie to cover. And at least as of recording, it's currently free to watch on Tubi. For anybody that hasn't seen it, it's a relatively short hour and a half. So it's, at least I think it's an easy watch. So I know that this was the first time that you watched this movie. So what did you think about the movie as a whole?
Yeah, I watched it the first time maybe a couple months ago. I think it was on Netflix at the time. And I liked it. I mean, there's some issues with it, but the overall concept I thought was pretty cool. The aerial shots are really neat, and beautiful, and they do a pretty good job of payoffs, I believe. Yeah,
I think that's what really attracted me to this movie, that it's structured really, really well. I think for me, the biggest failing is that it has such a small cast, and it's, the main character is, Ricky is played by Sam Gittins, and I liked him. I thought he did pretty well, but the rest of the main characters, they're all, French and Italian, and they are, they're acting in English, so it's clearly not their native language, so that has some issues, and I noticed, I watched this movie in subtitles, and I think the subtitles were done after the fact, and I could tell that whoever was doing the subtitles even had a hard time understanding what they were saying, because there are definitely sometimes where the subtitles just say mumbling,
yeah,
or they'll have the wrong word, but so that's a little bit of a hurdle to get past. Because the rest of the actors, they don't feel as natural as Sam Gittins does. But I was really attracted to the structure of this time loop film, and I love this. I kind of call it a fatalistic theory of the time loop. Everything that happens has already happened, more or less. So this has 4 time loops in it. So we'll have 4 episodes with each time loop, and then 1 episode before the time loop and 1 episode afterwards. And they all basically happen simultaneously. And so after the first time loop, then everything has already happened. It's all really in the past.
Right.
And I think it's interesting because if you look at it, one way, after the first time loop, the main character basically doesn't have any free will because he is just mimicking everything that has already happened without realizing it.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yep.
All right, well, I think it's a good time to go ahead and get into the actual, first time loop. We have the titles, which, I'm not really going to get into too much. I will say that this is an Italian movie that was made in English. So that, has its own issues with it. And then we get this opening shot, and I've looked at it a few times, and I don't understand why they start with this shelf full of, like, just these red jars. I'm not even sure what they are. They like pasta sauce or salsa, and then some jars of olives. I don't quite understand why the filmmakers decided that was the important part to start on.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's an Italian movie, so they had to have Italian spaghetti sauce and the stuff to make it show. Oh, we're Italian. Yeah. But I really like the music, how it the music during the opening credits kind of thing, or it fades into you could hear it like it's pretty. I forget the word, but I'm thinking of, but it transitions into a radio that they're listening to in their workshop. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a really cool transition.
Yeah, the radio music would be the diegetic music, if that's the word you're looking for.
Yes, that is it. Yep.
And then we have this whiteboard that has all these graphs and equations all over it, which I considered looking into it to see if they mean anything. The one that I can see is like the Pythagorean theorem with the right triangle.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure that most of this is just nonsense, or I mean, not necessarily nonsense. It's I wouldn't be surprised if it was accurate, but I also don't think that it actually has anything to do whatsoever with the actual experiment that they're trying to work on here.
Yeah, it's all a bunch of geometric shapes and all the like the actual written out theorems around them. But it's all a big jumbled mess, so you really can't tell exactly what they are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever get an idea, like, did you get a sense of what they were actually trying to accomplish with this experiment that they're doing? At least as it's described in the beginning of this movie. Because they talk about it, they talk a lot about this experiment. They don't ever mention time travel.
Right.
Because that seems like that might have been something that the father had in mind. Like, that was the father's ultimate goal. But the son Ricky seemed surprised whenever it happened. So I don't think that that's explicitly what they were working on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I said, yeah, they don't mention time travel. He is very, seems like he has no idea what's going on once the loops start happening. And he also, when he talks about the graphics in the computer, he talks about how it's a template for a video game.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was a funny thing to point out. The father's like, that's some nice graphics that you have there. He's like, yeah, it's I pulled it from a template from a video game I was working on. I almost feel like that's also potentially like a meta commentary. Like, that's where the filmmaker got the graphics from.
Right.
That the graphic designer pulled it from a template for a video game that he was working on.
Yeah. Or it also could be that, hey, we've got some good, graphics in this movie. Here's our first one we're going to show you. All the special effects and the graphics in here. It's like the first time we're seeing it. So we're going to show it to you right at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you think about this effect, this like almost Doppler-esque effect? Because they have the camera basically on the backside of this time machine with this like portal distortion in the middle, and then we're seeing the father through this, and we see like kind of waves where it's there's the real-time image, and then there's this slightly delayed by a couple seconds image, and the sound, we have a delay on the sound as well.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and how this little archway thing, it kind of reminds me of like Stargate.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Stargate for sure. It's like it is this big metal piece, and at one point he even flicks it to ding it like a tuning fork to get that that nice clear solid tone out of it. But it is like open at the top, so it's just like two rounded forks of a tuning fork.
Yeah. It's really cool looking. It's a good easy design, I guess, for a time machine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And then it's we have the moment where it shuts off and the computer has all this weird static all over it. Mm-hmm. And this starts a conceit that happens throughout the movie. And this, I will say, is one thing that I never really fully understood, because the machine and the lights as well, they'll basically throughout the rest of the movie, they'll sometimes they'll be off completely and sometimes they'll be on and working. And they say that the field is always on, but like sometimes the machine itself is off. And I didn't quite understand what they were trying to accomplish with that effect, because to me it just looked like it's maybe they didn't have the graphics, their graphics budget ran out, so they had to turn it off for a little while.
I mean, yeah, it's possible. It is like every time the power goes out, well, on the computer screen, if the bar gets up to where it says stable and then the lights go out, that's when a loop starts. Mm-hmm. or completes or whatever. That's the only thing I could really get out of it. But the randomness of it just shutting off is very confusing.
Yeah, although maybe I'll double check earlier, but I'm pretty sure that the pig coming through, which happens at the beginning of the next episode, that's the first, like the earliest instance of using the machine, and that's before, or that's after where the machine shuts off at the beginning of this, in this opening scene. So it kind of questions whether they're implying that maybe there was some other time loop event that we're not seeing, or if that was just like the initial malfunction. Because even like whenever he's walking towards the sun, you can see like the lights shut off for a couple seconds in the background, and then they come back on.
Right.
And then the father goes through this speech, and he decides to have a toast, which I don't fully understand why they're celebrating this failure.
Yeah, it is very hard to understand, and especially with the father. I can't remember his character name, but the father, with his accent, when he's going on his little monologue thing, it is hard to understand him. So, which makes it more confusing.
Oh yeah, the father's named Riccardo because it's the same. It's basically the Italian version of Ricky.
Okay, and but he also is talking about how it didn't work, and the son says it's the theory was, it works in theory so far, but the mechanics of it is not working. So the father at first says, before he walks over to the table to do the toast, says that it's a mechanical failure, so it's always his fault. Like he's blaming him for it not working, but then he still wants to come over and do this toast. Yeah, I didn't really understand either.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that I think a lot of the speeches that the father gives is where the movie really struggles. Because he is offering a lot of exposition, but it's hard to understand exposition, and that's twofold, because it's hard to understand exactly what he's saying through the accent, and also what he's saying is concepts that are harder to understand, because he's not just giving like a simple explanation most of the time. He's trying to explain the more complicated aspects of the script. So I do think that's like the father, it's always the father's fault, just like he said in his speech. It's always his fault.
Right.
But that, this is a short scene, and they get to the time loop stuff really quickly. This is a 4.5 minute scene, and almost 2 minutes of that is just the opening logos. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining me on this. It's hard for me to know what to call it, because it's the start of a new movie, but it's the middle of the third season. This is, these three similarly structured movies that I'm covering for this Recursion season on It's Time to Rewind here. But why don't you go ahead and take a minute to let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yeah, well, you can find me on all your podcatchers at Top Gun Minute. I am also on Twitter at Top Gun Minute Pod, and I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group. It's called the Top Gun Minute Listeners School.
And I am Bubbawheat, and as always, you can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. And you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can discuss the podcast episodes as they come out, as well as any discussion about time loop movies or TV shows or TV episodes that you like. And
I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian tradition.
Teacher,